Hey, welcome to another episode of In the Chute. I am Brandon Carpenter, and with me is my, what do you usually say, esteemed colleague and
Esteemed colleague.
and, and son Calen, the techno wizard. They struggle to get me up to this mic and a computer on, and after a couple of days of practice and notes, we're able to have this conversation for you. What do you got,
I,
Calen?
I know this is probably going to be coming out around Mother's Day, and I want to say I love my mother dearly. However, you are a saint when it comes to dealing with technical anything because just trying to
Well,
get her on a Zoom call a couple weeks ago was a struggle.
well,
That's no
and I'm
knock
bad.
on her. It's just she's always been like that. It's not again not her fault. It's just the way it is. It's like,
It's her
Mom, I
fault.
love you, but you need to figure out your technical stuff.
You know what she's looking at? She's looking at the light at the end of the tunnel on
I
not
know.
having to use any
I know.
technology, and she's starting to do that resisting. I don't want to learn it. I don't have to learn it. Pretty soon I
I
won't
know.
need to do it.
But
So good luck.
my mom has very few faults. That's probably her biggest fault right there is the fact that she just does not want to conform to technology at all. And she deals with it every day.
I
Anyway,
know it's
today's
crazy.
question
Okay.
has nothing to do with that. But when it comes to transporting animals, specifically, we've got a horse and cattle ranch. When it comes to transporting horses and cows across not only state lines, but also county lines, and then on occasion international lines. These boundaries, what does it entail? I know we've got some stuff that we've got to do some blood tests and things like that. Primarily, we've dealt mostly with horses because that's the ones that we're the most involved with for transport. However, I know there's been times where we've had to do it for cattle. So I just want to say, maybe start with horses and then what's the things with cattle?
Yeah, that's a good point. The transport on the horses is generally more involved for us because they have to be, like you say, blood tested if you're going out of state or out of the country. We send some horses to Canada or
Mm-hmm.
through Canada, even just to transport through Canada to go to Alaska. And we've got a number of horses that have been sold and sent to Alaska, and of course some into Canada too. But um, you have to have a health certificate that's done by a veterinarian, a blood draw that's sent to a lab to make sure that they don't have. It's called a Coggins test, the test for infectious equine anemia, um, and just to make sure they don't have it because that can spread and that's a bad thing. It's disease transmission control is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
So you get a hold of your vet, you get a Coggins test done. They get the results of the Coggins test back. Sometimes they're depending on, and this is a lot of times dependent on a client. They'll say, "Hey, I want that horse. I want to take him back. I've shown up, and here we go." And it's like, usually these are like a 3-4 day test turnaround on these
Mm-hmm.
labs. And so sometimes, and especially if
Well,
you
and
got
when
one
you're
going
dealing with
out
the
of state.
government, expect that 3 or 4 days to turn into 30 or 40 days. But hey,
Well, yeah, it's not quite that bad. But there's sometimes you can do like a 24-hour test. It's and they, you pay for
but
all
you're
of
gonna
that.
pay
But
for it, yeah.
yeah, and they turn that around, and some of them are with a federal test or for the federal Coggins, for the international going through another country or into another country. So you have to have that. Once that's cleared and everything's good to go, then you get a brand inspection from a brand inspector, livestock. You can go down to the yards and do it. Take the animal down there. They look at them.
And
You've got
that's
all
whether
your
they have a brand physically on them or not.
physically on them or not. You can have a slick horse, but you still have to be identified, and they'll draw a picture, literally a sketch of the markings on a kind of a blank look on a pad that's a transport or brand inspection for that person, and then they'll draw in the stockings if they have them or a star, and it's to scale and the right shape. I mean, everything's recorded as far as gelding, mare, filly, stallion, color, all of those markings on them, any tattoos, anything like that you're going to be able to identify that horse without taking an actual picture with it. Now, some states do pictures.
Oh,
I
really?
think
I didn't
I
know
think
that.
Wyoming does a video, or not a video, but a picture of the horse that's on or part of the brand inspection. So, um, not a bad way to go, you know.
No.
So you have to get those, and then once that's done, then they can take that animal and transport it either across the state line or the international line. Just to move a horse across county lines, you don't have to have a Coggins or health inspection from the vet within the state, but you do have to have a current brand inspection. Whether you own the animal and are going to just transport it for yourself, say we're going to take a trip to the mountains and you're going to cross county lines, then you have to have a brand inspection, a current one, for each one of those animals to transport them across the county line and or multiple county lines. So I think you can actually ride into the next county if you're a horseback adjoining counties. And that law may have changed, but you could physically ride your horse into the next county to work cattle because, you know, sometimes you straddle county lines with
Right.
a place or you're working, you know, and helping somebody. But beyond that, you got to have your brand inspection. And of course, when you sell a horse, you have limited number of days to make that transfer official. And of course, it's about, I don't think they ever look at those. I'm sure they don't, but at least they have a record of it. I think more of it is for fee collection,
Yeah.
you know, but I mean, there's a good reason for it as well. I mean, if I had a brand inspection on a horse and my horse come up missing, you got somewhere to start, you know,
Well,
and
it's also like going to the DMV and switching out titles too, right? I mean,
yeah, in a
in a
way, yeah.
way, it's a way of keeping all the records as current as possible. Like, oh, this person no longer owns this little Chevy pickup. They've now got it. This person now owns it. Oh, okay, got it. So
Right.
now this horse now belongs to this person, but it's been now sold to this other person. So just kind
Yeah,
of keep it up to date.
and that's outside of any kind of a registration transfer through
Yeah.
you know, breed organization. So you can have a great horse that's not got any papering or any recorded breeding lineage at all, and they still have to be uh, you know, set up with a brand inspection for the same exact reasons, either through county lines, state lines, or international lines.
Now,
Um,
something too is I'm thinking this is all the paperwork part, but then what the purpose behind a lot of it, especially with the Coggins test, is to minimize or mitigate any disease transfer across not only state but international lines. So, what are some things that you often recommend to either clients or friends on how to keep their horses when they are traveling? Not necessarily the paperwork, but physically keep them from getting sick by coming into contact with other horses and stuff like that.
yeah, don't come into contact with other horses. You don't know, you don't know where they're at. I mean, you see us go up, say up into a trailhead of the Forest Service.
Yep.
Do I tie up to? They have these courtesy places to tie your horse up to, and you can feed and let them graze right there. I don't tie up to those.
Right.
No way in hell. I've seen people do that and pick up some bug, and next thing you know, they're doctoring a horse that some have come very close to death, and they don't know what it is. They're just treating a broad spectrum antibiotics and trying to keep this thing alive and keep them hydrated. So, yeah, just stay away from other animals. I don't trust. There's a lot of boarding places, and those are, you know, places that are very reputable. They do a really good job, and I think they disinfect a stall or an area, and they keep everybody separated so that you don't have any contact like that. But there are some that have had outbreaks of like hoof and mouth disease. Um, bad, bad, bad. That's super, super communicable. So it's all about controlling that disease. And if these Coggins tests come back positive for equine anemia, you better not let that horse go out of state, because guess what? You are going to be held liable for that,
Right.
and rightly so, because you don't want to spread diseases anywhere. So
Well, and I think
there's good purpose behind it.
you're bringing up a good point too. Of, I said coming in contact with horses, but then like the trailhead thing, that's just a passive contact. And people are like, well, how would they get that? Okay, well, have you ever seen a horse bite on something like wood? It's called cribbing. Like they literally just bite on it. Think about your little kid is getting on a bus and licking the window, and then the kid behind them comes up and licks the window, and then the kid behind them comes and licks the window. It's the same concept, and so you're
Well, and
picking up
it's
something.
even worse than that. I mean, you can have somebody lays out a bunch of hay, tying their horse up to this. They lay out a little bit of hay,
And
and their
poop all
horse has
over.
got a snotty nose,
Mm.
and they're dribbling snot on this hay, and then you come up there and you let that horse eat that hay. Now
Right.
I mean, it's very easily transmittable. It's easier than you would imagine. And horses got phenomenal immune systems, but still, they're susceptible to diseases like anything else.
So
Cattle are
that's
a lot
horses.
easier.
What about cows?
Yeah, we don't ship a lot of cattle out of state for sale as a private treaty. We go through and go to the stockyards and they do that. But if you're in an area where, say, there's a lot of buffalo, like around the park, you got buffer areas, you may have brucellosis. Your or what they call bangs. Your cattle have to be inoculated or vaccinated for brucellosis before they can leave some of those surveillance area counties. So there's again the same thing. You don't want to have an outbreak of brucellosis, but we normally don't even have to go to a brand inspector to move some of our cattle if it goes to if they're going to market. The state has got on their website, which really does make it easy if you're doing it yourself and don't let your mother do it with the technology. So Uh, and the state site is not very friendly. Trust me, I've just used it enough that I can get around to it and find drop down boxes, who you are, where you're from, what county, what animals, what sex, what age, what breed, and you put all that in with the date and what facility you're taking them to, whether it's the public auction yards, the Billings Livestock Commission, whether you're taking them to somewhere else, all of these different ones in the state that you could take your cattle to. And it's a transport permit basically for that time. And you've got 24 or 48 hours to do it. If you don't, then you have to contact them, let them know that you did not move these cattle or one of them didn't go. And it's the number of them. So they're pretty tight control on that as well, which is good. I mean, I'm good with that. The county they come from and the county you're going to. Um, but it's all online. And so I can load up a load of calves or some cows or something that's going to town, a bull, and get them in the trailer. Say, okay, this is what we're doing. And in 5 minutes, I can go in, um, put all the information in, pay for it by a credit card for the permit, and go down the line. It beats going into town and trying to find somebody who has the ability to write you a market permit.
Right.
So that's a lot easier. But if you were going out of town or out of state, you got your brand inspections, and those animals are on a truck. And I don't know exactly, so I'm guessing here, but if you got somebody who transports cattle for a business for a living, I think they basically have your bill of sale or brand inspection. If they look at them, whoever bought them, they load them on the truck and they go directly to the facility that purchased them or where they're going to be like fed out for cattle, young cattle, feedlot cattle, or they're going to a place where it's eventually fairly quickly will go to a butcher shop.
Yeah. And I would say the other thing too nice about the community in which we work is you could have a truck driver who's done it a million times and you're the first time you've ever worked with them. You're like, hey, I've never transported to Sheridan before. We've always done within Montana. Now we're going to Wyoming. You've done this a lot, right? And like, oh yeah, normally they're pretty gruff. And they're like, yeah, done a million times. What do you need? You're like, so what exactly do you need from us? Like, have you seen a process? Is there a good guy to contact? And normally they'll be like, yeah, here, I got Bob on my phone here.
Right.
Take this number. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, can you repeat that just a little bit slower?
Yeah, because it's
Bob,
a millionth and 10th time that they've done
his
it.
number is blah, blah, blah. But yeah, honestly, they might be gruff, but they're really helpful. Those guys are so knowledgeable. They've done it again millions of times that they can tell you who to contact, what to do, and typically what the hangups are. You're like, oh, that's great. Thanks, man. I'll be back in contact with you in about a day. Okay.
You think of a guy like down where you grew up, and some of your friends, John Mitchell. He's got a trucking business, reputable guy, decent guy, hardworking, and his wife. I mean, they've done this for years and would be really good resource. Even if you called him and you didn't know, you could say, "Hey, what do I do?" And I know he would be really good about, telling you, this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
So,
Now, one last comment before we sign off on this one. You said uh, things about bangs for buffalo and cattle near Yellowstone National Park. How about domestic buffalo? Because we do have a small buffalo
yeah.
ranch about 45 miles west of us. What's kind of the difference between the wild buffalo and the domestic grown
Well, I
buffalo?
think your domestic buffalo probably already they're vaccinated, and I'm sure they're surveilled, because they're also considered livestock if they are
Mm-hmm.
privately owned.
Right.
So if they've come in contact or had
An
facility
outbreak.
contact in another area with had other buffalo, I mean that's something you have to look at. And I'm not familiar with that. We're not in a surveillance area because we're far enough away from that, but it is in
Yeah.
another county. We don't come anywhere close to them. So until that's a problem, we wouldn't have to deal with that, and hopefully it's never is a problem. But when I was a kid, every cow was bang vaccinated, every single cow, and because we were trying to get a handle on brucellosis, spreading that,
Yeah.
and then the success was, in the I think it was mid to late 70s, maybe, probably wrong there. We were deemed brucellosis free state. So like, yeah, and you didn't have to vaccinate because, you were there was no threat of brucellosis here until then we started having things with, Yellowstone Park and buffalo going out into those areas. So now we're back to surveilling those areas and vaccinating and really watching that. So, and there's both sides of the debate on that, whether or not brucellosis is spread to domestic cattle, or from elk for that matter, and to cattle, because you'll see, sometimes they'll go nose to nose and,
What are
sniffing each other.
you?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, depending on what side of the fence you're on, they say, those that like the wild buffalo to go wherever, there's no threat. Well, it can be because brucellosis is also a cyclic disease where there will be periods of
Remission.
yes, and then periods where it'll come up and you'll be able to detect it, but then it'll go back out in more like a remission is a good way to put it. So, I mean, when I was in college doing some of my technical, lab work and some of my research, that was one of the things we talked about was, brucellosis. Yeah, how come some animals show they're hot for brucellosis and then later they don't? Well, it's a cyclic disease, and it can and may not come back. So you just never know. There's a lot. I think there's a lot that we still surmise about it, and I'm sure there's some vets out there that know they got a handle on this. We know all about it, and maybe they do, maybe you don't, but
Well,
you
if
still
we get
guard
Dr.
against.
Fauci on it, I'm sure we'll figure it out. Anyway, we'll
Yeah,
take it and put it out to pasture.